Tonight we open your satchel, cinch your belt, and set your boots toward the unknown. The road is long, the inns are few, and, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this with all your teeth. Still, that's part of the charm of medieval travel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin at dawn, the mist clinging to the fields like unwashed wool, your bundle hanging heavy from your shoulder. It's not much of a pack, just a tan leather satchel, softened from years of use and more than a few accidental encounters with goats. Inside, you've tucked everything you think you'll need: a loaf of coarse rye bread, a small knife, 2 pairs of linen hose, each already patched, and that one charm your grandmother swore kept away both wolves and bad dreams. She might have been lying, but who are you to test fate? The first thing every traveler learns: comfort is a luxury for nobles and fools. Your boots, hand-stitched from cowhide, promise protection but guarantee blisters. By the second mile, you're already imagining a future where shoes are softer and roads smoother. But no, this is the 14th century, and you're stuck with mud, stones, and your own overconfidence. Historians still argue whether most travelers even wore socks, but you do, and they're already soaked through. You carry bread, hard enough to chip a tooth, and a wedge of cheese so pungent it could ward off demons. These are your rations for the road: simple, portable, and, in theory, edible. You tuck a few dried figs into a pouch, a small luxury that reminds you of home. Every crumb feels precious, a little promise of civilization in the endless countryside. And yes, you'll eat the bread even after you drop it in horse manure. You'll just scrape it clean first. Tied around your waist, a leather purse jingles with a handful of coins. Mostly small change, deniers and obols, but enough to pay for a night's lodging or bribe a gatekeeper who suddenly discovers your travel permit isn't quite in order. You've hidden the rest in your boots, though you'll later curse yourself when you forget and step in a puddle. Medieval travelers were always creative about where to stash money. Historians have found hidden pockets sewn into doublets, hollowed walking sticks, even amulets that doubled as tiny safes. You just hope your satchel doesn't burst its seams. There's also a scrap of parchment tucked among your belongings, your itinerary, such as it is. A few rough notes: the next market town, the name of a monastery rumored to shelter travelers, a sketchy drawing of the main river crossing. Maps exist, yes, but mostly for scholars and dreamers. Your parchment is more wish than guarantee, drawn by someone who swears they once went that way 10 years ago. Still, better than nothing. And then there are the keepsakes, because no journey begins without a touch of sentiment. A lock of hair tied in ribbon, maybe, or a little carved token of Saint Christopher, the patron saint of travelers. Not that you trust him entirely. Last time you invoked his name, your mule bolted. But it feels wrong to leave without something holy near your heart. You slip it into your pouch, right next to the breadcrumbs and coins. By midday, the sun burns through the fog, and the road stretches ahead in long, dusty ribbons. You pass other travelers, a merchant wagon rumbling under sacks of grain, a barefoot pilgrim murmuring prayers with each step, a troop of soldiers who don't meet your eye. Everyone carries a story, and everyone carries too much. The pilgrim's pack clinks faintly, probably filled with relics or shells from Santiago. You envy his faith, he envies your bread. At your first rest, you sit beneath a crooked oak, unlace your boots, and examine the day's damage. The blisters look like angry pearls. You tear a strip of linen from your spare shirt and wrap your foot, muttering something unholy. This is only day one. You're already wondering if the saints take requests for shorter journeys. A magpie lands nearby, eyeing the gleam of your coin purse. Don't even think about it, you mutter. You're talking to a bird now. The road has already begun its slow enchantment, its way of making solitude feel crowded, and silence feel like company. Travelers of your century often reported strange moods on the road, visions, voices, even prophetic dreams. Historians still argue whether it was hunger, exhaustion, or genuine mysticism. You'll have plenty of time to decide. As night falls, you reach a roadside shrine, a humble stack of stones marked with a cross. You drop a pebble onto it, a quiet offering for safe passage. A few candles flicker nearby, left by those who passed before you. You whisper a small prayer, though mostly you ask that the next in not charge double for straw bedding. The irony of praying for affordable lodging is not lost on you. You set your bundle down, take stock once more. Bread, check. Cheese, check. Knife, check. Amulet, check. A sense of security? Long gone. But in its place, something new. A strange lightness, a freedom that smells faintly of damp wool and wood smoke. Every item you carry has a weight, but also a purpose. The road demands both. As you curl up beside the dying light, you think of the things you didn't pack. Comfort, certainty, the luxury of turning back. The wind murmurs through the grass like a lullaby, and your satchel rests beside you, full of humble treasures and foolish hopes. Tomorrow, you'll walk again. And with each mile, you'll learn that what you carry isn't nearly as important as what you're willing to leave behind. You wake stiff as an old hinge, your cloak stiff with dew and your breath visible in the morning chill. The world smells like damp earth, wood smoke, and horse. And you realize, right about the moment you try to stand up, that your boots have shrunk overnight. Medieval footwear has a sense of humor like that. They call it travel gear, but most of what you're wearing would make a modern hiker burst into tears. Your boots, stitched from untreated cowhide, were never really waterproof. The tanner swore they were as sturdy as a knight's oath, which, judging by the mud already seeping through the soles, is not reassuring. Some travelers rub their boots with tallow or lard, hoping the grease will repel water. It works for about half an hour, then your feet just smell like dinner. Historians still argue whether beeswax or animal fat was the superior method, but either way, it's your toes that lose. You shake the sleep from your limbs and throw on your cloak. It's heavy, scratchy, and smells faintly of sheep, which makes sense, it used to be one. Wool cloaks are the traveler's best friend and worst enemy. They keep out the cold but soak up rain like a sponge. You've seen people twist the ends of their cloaks into knots to wring them dry, a kind of soggy ritual every traveler knows by heart. There's a certain art to layering. Linen under tunic, wool over tunic, cloak on top, belt cinched tight to hold your pouch and knife. The trick is to strike a balance between warmth and mobility, because the moment you sweat, you're doomed. Once that damp wool freezes, it's like hugging a block of ice. You start to suspect the medieval wardrobe was less about style and more about survival roulette. You pass a line of pilgrims trudging the opposite way, hoods up, cloaks flapping, feet bare. You'd think going barefoot would be madness, but some believe it earns divine favor. Or maybe they just couldn't afford boots. One of them nods to you and says, "Rain's coming." Of course it is. It's always coming. By noon, the drizzle turns to proper rain, and you discover the meaning of sodden. Your cloak gains 5 extra pounds, and the mud sucks at your boots with an obscene squelch. You glance enviously at a passing noble on horseback, his fur-lined mantle gleaming darkly under the downpour. His servant rides behind him carrying a spare, because if you're rich enough, you never need to dry off, you just change outfits mid-journey. You, on the other hand, look like a walking laundry heap. You find brief shelter under an oak tree, spreading your cloak across a low branch in a hopeless attempt to dry it. As you wait, you consider your wardrobe inventory. You have 2 tunics, one for wearing, one for pretending you might one day wear again. both smell like you've been sleeping near goats, because you have. You have hose that cling to your calves like wet parchment. You have a hat that may once have been fashionable, now more mushroom than headgear. And you have one pair of threadbare gloves that you keep mostly for sentiment. Your mother stitched them before you left, using all that was good enough for shepherds. She didn't mention it was also itchy enough to drive you mad. It's not all misery, though. Your belt carries the small, practical things that make you feel prepared. Your knife, your pouch of salt, your flint and steel, your eating spoon carved from bone. Every object hangs with reassuring familiarity, tiny lifelines dangling from leather. Medieval travelers were like walking toolboxes, their belts loaded with whatever might save them from hunger, bandits, or boredom. A passing merchant joins you beneath the tree, tipping his hat in greeting. His cloak is oiled, actual oiled canvas from Flanders, and the rain slides right off it like it's afraid. He tells you it cost him half a month's profits. You try not to hate him. Instead, you ask about his route, and he warns you about flooded bridges ahead. He also mentions that a tanner in the next town sells miracle grease for boots. You'll definitely buy some, because hope is cheaper than new shoes. As the rain slackens, you gather your damp layers and set off again. The road is a ribbon of puddles, reflecting grey skies and your greyer mood. Still, there's something oddly comforting about the rhythm of travel. The steady slap of boots, the whisper of fabric, the soft hiss of rain. You start humming to yourself, some tavern tune about lost loves and even more lost socks. A few miles later, you spot a small shrine by the road, its niche holding a tiny carved Virgin Mary. Someone has draped her in a scrap of blue cloth, another traveler's offering, maybe from their own cloak. You touch your wet sleeve in silent solidarity. Every traveler leaves a bit of themselves behind, one way or another. As dusk settles, you reach a shepherd's hut and trade a coin for floor space by the hearth. The smoke burns your eyes, but the warmth seeps deep, and you hang your cloak nearby, watching the steam rise in ghostly curls. The shepherd's wife eyes your boots with pity and says she's seen worse. You don't believe her. Over a bowl of broth, you overhear the man say that some travelers rub their cloaks with goose fat to repel rain. Others, he claims, use a concoction of pitch and beeswax that smells so vile no thief dares come near. You decide to try the goose fat option next time. It sounds less like tar and more like dinner. Before you sleep, you turn your boots upside down by the fire. You've learned the hard way to check for spiders and, once, a very offended frog. Travel teaches caution. It also teaches gratitude. Because when your only shelter is a leaky roof and your best defense against weather is a greasy wool cloak, every dry hour feels like a small miracle. The wind howls outside, tugging at the thatch roof, but you're warm now, wrapped in wool and fatigue. The boots will still leak tomorrow. The cloak will still smell like a barn. But you'll rise again, because in the Middle Ages, survival is fashion. And yours, however muddy, looks good on you. Morning mist curls around your face as you wake to the sound of a bleating goat trying to eat your cloak. You gently shoo it away, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and realize your stomach is already grumbling. Breakfast, if you can call it that, awaits in your satchel. Bread hard enough to audition as a weapon and cheese that smells increasingly like its own personality. You're not the only one struggling with medieval meal prep. Most travelers rely on food that survives neglect. Fresh fruit, soft cheese, tender meat. These are luxuries for people who aren't walking across entire countries on roads made of regret. You, like countless pilgrims before you, live on the holy trinity of medieval travel cuisine: bread, legumes, and salted protein. Together they form a nutritional strategy best described as barely not dying. The bread comes first. Thick, dark, and gritty with leftover husks. It's made from rye or barley flour because wheat is too precious for the likes of you. Each bite feels like chewing on ambition. You knock it against your knee, it doesn't break. You try again, it still doesn't break. You briefly consider using it as a hammer before soaking it in water. Some travelers dip it in ale to soften it, though that just makes it taste like soggy beer sadness. Historians still argue whether medieval bread was intentionally that dense or if bakers simply gave up after realizing how many travelers would eat it anyway. You slice off a piece of your cheese, which has developed a delightful blue edge that may or may not be mold. You tell yourself it's extra flavor. The truth is, dairy is one of the few portable luxuries on the road, high in fat, forgiving when aged, and occasionally capable of walking off on its own if you're not careful. Cheese, after all, is the medieval equivalent of energy bars. And then there's the salted fish, your most faithful but least exciting companion. It's been dried so thoroughly you could use it as roofing material. You hack off a piece with your knife and chew slowly, pretending not to notice how much salt burns your tongue. The salt's not just for flavor, it's what keeps the fish from turning into an ecological crime scene. Some travelers carry dried peas or lentils instead, easy to boil over a campfire. You'd love to try that if you could ever find dry firewood. Still, there's a rhythm to these meals. Soak, chew, pray you don't chip a tooth, repeat. Between bites, you watch smoke rise from a distant cottage and think how strange it is that people build homes while others just pass through. The road is a kind of hunger too, one that's never quite fed. You pass a wayside tavern by noon, tempted by the smell of stew thick with onions and hope. But the sign out front says no credit, and your purse is lighter than your optimism. You press on, deciding instead to eat what's left of your bread and a few dried figures. Medieval travelers often carried small sweets like dates or candied nuts, not for indulgence but for energy. You nibble one and imagine it's cake. You're very good at self-delusion by now. By the time you reach a stream, the sun is high, and you sit to refill your flask. You know the water's probably unsafe, everyone knows, but thirst wins. You remember what that merchant said yesterday about ale being safer than water. He wasn't wrong. Brewing kills most bacteria, though it replaces them with hangovers. Clean water is such a rarity that people in towns boil it with herbs or even wine to make it palatable. Travelers without such luxuries simply hope for the best. Historians still argue whether most people actually died from bad water or just from everything else trying to kill them first. You eat again that evening, this time by a small campfire. You share your bread with a fellow wanderer, a tinker with more teeth missing than tools, and in exchange he tells you a story about a knight who swore his horse could sniff out inns with fresh ale. You both laugh until your stomachs ache, because you know it's probably true. As darkness thickens, the firelight glows gold against your bread crust. You can almost imagine you're feasting in a noble hall. The truth is, every crumb on the road feels like a banquet when you're hungry enough. You remember a story you once heard about King Louis IX, how even he carried food on pilgrimage, simple loaves and dried fruit, just like you. The difference, of course, is that his servants carried it for him. You think of home again, the scent of warm bread, your mother scolding you for picking at the crust, the sound of laughter by the hearth. You wonder if she'd laugh now, seeing you gnawing at a loaf that could double as building material. You smile anyway. Sentiment is seasoning, and on the road, it's the only kind you get for free. Your final bite of the day is soft only because it's soaked in rainwater. You chew slowly, eyes on the stars. Each one seems to shimmer with faint amusement, as if the universe is quietly judging your dining habits. You'd argue back, but your mouth is full. You curl up beneath your cloak, full in the way only exhaustion can fill you. Around you, the night hums, crickets, the crackle of embers, the whisper of your stomach negotiating peace. Tomorrow's meal will be the same, and you'll love it just as much. Because hunger has a way of turning even the humblest food into legend. You fall asleep dreaming of soft bread, clean ale, and a kitchen that doesn't move with every step. But for now, your dinner of crumbs and salt will do. The road, after all, feeds more than just the body. The sun creeps over the horizon, turning the world into liquid gold, or as close to gold as it gets when you're trudging through muck. Your flask sloshes faintly at your hip, the sound both comforting and suspicious. You give it a shake and pray it's still drinkable. In the Middle Ages, hydration was less a science and more a gamble. Your flask, made from stitched leather and lined with pitch, is as precious as any relic. You've spent more time tending to it than to your own feet. You open it now and sniff cautiously. A wave of sour ale hits your nose, warm, stale, faintly metallic. Perfect. The good news, it won't kill you. The bad news, it probably won't quench your thirst either. Water, the most basic of human needs, is a medieval traveler's nemesis. Wells are few, streams unreliable, and purification non-existent. People in towns drink small beer, a weak ale brewed specifically because it's safer than water. You'd think boiling would solve the problem, but wood for fires costs money, and you'd rather spend that coin on boots or bandit bribes. So you sip your liquid courage and tell yourself it's fine. Historians still argue whether people of the time truly avoided water altogether or just preferred something that made walking a little more interesting. You refill the flask from a slow-moving brook, eyeing it suspiciously. It looks clear, but then, so do most bad decisions. A frog stares up at you as if to say, your funeral. You decide to take the risk, filtering it through a scrap of linen. It doesn't help much, but the ritual makes you feel clever. You imagine future scholars calling you an innovator. More likely, they'll call you the unfortunate skeleton found by the riverbank. The taste is earthy, metallic, and faintly alive. You add a splash of ale to mask it, a trick every seasoned traveler knows. The alcohol doesn't purify the water, but it does make you care less about what's floating in it. You screw the flask shut and hang it back at your hip, giving it a reassuring pat, like a friend who's both dependable and slightly treacherous. Later that afternoon, you encounter a group of pilgrims resting by a roadside shrine. They are passing around a clay jug and laughing, a rare sound on the road. They invite you to join, and you do, because who refuses hospitality when it comes with drink? The jug contains wine, thin and sour, but still a step up from your swamp ale. You take a sip and cough politely. They grin. Better than water, one says. Barely, you reply, and everyone laughs like your old friends. One of them, a woman with a scallop shell pinned to her cloak, tells you she once met a monk who swore he could make water pure by whispering Latin over it. Another traveler claims there's a well near Chartres whose water heals both body and soul, though he admits it might also give you worms. Historians still argue whether those miracle springs actually healed anyone or just provided the medieval equivalent of tourist attractions. Either way, you find yourself wishing for one now. As the day grows hotter, your thirst becomes a steady ache. You chew a piece of salted fish to make yourself feel less parched, which only makes it worse. There's a reason travelers often carried small flasks of vinegar mixed with herbs. It cut through the salt and supposedly kept one cool of humor. You don't have vinegar, but you do have a dried sprig of mint tied to your pouch. You drop it into your flask before your next drink, and for a fleeting moment, the taste almost feels refreshing. Almost. By evening, your lips are cracked and your skin dusted with salt. You find a small inn and, with your last few coins, buy a cup of watered wine. The innkeeper calls it claret, but you suspect it's closer to regret. Still, it's clean, or at least, clean enough that your stomach doesn't protest. The man beside you boasts that his cousin once crossed the Alps carrying nothing but a wineskin and faith. You nod solemnly and wonder how much of him made it back. The inn's candlelight flickers against your flask as you set it down beside your bowl of stew. You realize how much this simple vessel has come to mean, how often you've relied on it, cursed it, and prayed it wouldn't leak. Travelers in your century seldom leave home without one, some even decorating them with charms or etched prayers. You trace a finger over yours, feeling the faint pattern pressed into the leather. Maybe it's superstition, or maybe it's comfort, two things often confused on the road. As night deepens, the inn grows quiet. You lie on straw that smells faintly of beer and listen to rain tapping the shutters. Somewhere outside, a horse snorts, and a man swears softly as he trips over something. You clutch your flask, half asleep, and dream of clean mountain springs, their waters cool and safe. But when dawn comes, you'll drink from your ale-soaked leather again, because that's what travelers do: survive first, complain second. The next morning, you wake with a mild headache and a strong craving for fresh water. You find a puddle outside glistening with morning light, lean down, and laugh. No, not yet. You've learned your lesson. You reach for your flask, take a long swallow of warm ale, and wince. The day begins the same way it always does, with bad decisions and good intentions. Your footsteps squelch as you start walking again, the weight of your flask tugging gently at your hip. It's a small burden, but a constant one. Like thirst, or faith, or hope that the next stream might just taste a little less like frogs. By now, the road feels like an old friend who occasionally tries to kill you. You've learned that walking isn't the dangerous part, it's what, and who, waits along the way. Every traveler in medieval Europe knows the rule: never go unarmed, even if your weapon is just an enthusiastic stick and a bad attitude. You carry both. Your walking stick is a sturdy length of ash wood, polished smooth from use and just heavy enough to send a clear message to any would-be thief. Some travelers carry daggers, small, quick, easy to hide, but yours is more tool than weapon, a short blade you use to slice bread, cut rope, and occasionally gesture dramatically when telling stories. You're not exactly knight material, but you've learned the art of looking slightly more dangerous than you are. Weapon laws vary by region. In one town, a dagger on your belt marks you as a respectable traveler. In the next, it marks you for arrest. So you keep yours half hidden beneath your cloak, hoping local guards have bad eyesight. Historians still argue whether common folk carried weapons mainly for defense or just because everyone else did. Either way, you've noticed no one ever questions the pilgrim with a big stick. This morning, the air smells like rain and horse sweat, a sure sign there's a market town ahead. You pass a caravan of merchants, 5 men, 3 mules, and enough noise to wake the dead. Their leader nods at your staff. "Good stick," he says. "Could break a skull clean in half." You smile politely and change the subject. Inside the town walls, you feel the tension ease for the first time in days. Crowds are safety, and you can finally lower your guard, slightly. You stop by a blacksmith stall and watch him hammer out small knives, the sound sharp as thunder. He sells you a simple iron dirk, well balanced, just heavy enough to make you feel important. You pay in coins so old the image of the king has nearly vanished, but the smith doesn't care. He spits on his hand, shakes yours, and mutters something about safer travels. It sounds like a curse. Leaving the market, you adjust your belt so the new blade hangs comfortably against your thigh. It feels odd, empowering, like a promise you're not sure you'll keep. You wonder how many travelers before you thought the same, only to find out that courage is less about steel and more about luck. A few miles out of town, you meet a pair of wandering friars who carry nothing more dangerous than walking staves carved with crosses. One of them tells you that faith is the best protection. The other has a black eye. You nod respectfully and tighten your grip on your stick. Later, on a stretch of lonely road, you hear footsteps behind you, quick, light, deliberate. You glance back and spot a young man in a ragged cloak closing the distance. You quicken your pace. So does he. When he finally calls out, his voice is too cheerful to trust. "Traveler, spare a coin." You shake your head without turning. He speeds up again. You stop abruptly, spinning your stick in your hand the way you once saw a guard do in town. It looks impressive enough that the stranger halts, blinking. "Never mind," he says, backing away with his palms raised. "Didn't mean nothing." You watch him vanish into the trees and feel your pulse hammering. You'll later tell the story as if you were calm and wise. Right now, you're just glad your hands didn't shake enough to drop the stick. Violence on the road is so common it barely counts as news. Bandits, desperate peasants, disbanded soldiers, they all haunt the byways. Some travelers hire guards or join caravans for safety, but others rely on cleverness. One trick you learned in a tavern: carry a rosary in your hand and mutter prayers loudly. Even the most hardened thief hesitates before robbing a person who might be cursed. You try it once just to test the theory. It works, though it also earns you a long lecture from a real priest who overhears and calls it blasphemy. By sunset, you camp beside a ruined wall. Your stick lies beside you, your dagger gleams faintly in the firelight. You think of all the odd weapons travelers have carried through the centuries: axes disguised as walking poles, stones wrapped in cloth, even sharpened spoons. Somewhere, someone once fended off a wolf with nothing but a wooden shoe. You'd like to meet that person. You'd also like to borrow their shoe. You carve small notches into your staff, marking the number of days on the road. Each groove feels like a victory. You tell yourself it's just counting time, but secretly you like the way it looks, a record of endurance written in wood. The smell of smoke mixes with pine, and your eyes grow heavy. The dagger rests close to your hand, a reminder that even in sleep, the world demands awareness. Before drifting off, you imagine yourself as one of those travelers in the old tales. The brave wanderer, the cunning survivor, the one who faces danger and keeps walking. You snort softly at your own dramatics. You're no hero, just a tired soul with sore feet and decent reflexes. But on roads like these, sometimes that's enough. The fire crackles, the night hums, and your staff gleams faintly beside you, loyal and silent. You'll rise again tomorrow, a little wiser, a little more paranoid, and still convinced that the best weapon is a well-timed joke. The next morning smells faintly of damp earth and superstition, two things you're beginning to recognize as constants on this trip. You rise stiffly, sling your satchel over your shoulder, and check the small pouch where you keep your most mysterious possession, a relic. Or, at least, something sold to you as one. It's a splinter of bone wrapped in linen and sealed with wax, supposedly from the finger of St. Giles. Or maybe Saint somebody else. The vendor mumbled the name, and you were too polite, and slightly hungover, to ask twice. You bought it in a market weeks ago after the seller assured you it could cure blisters, repel thieves, and smell faintly of heaven. It does not smell heavenly, but you keep it close anyway, hanging from a leather cord inside your tunic. Relics are the medieval traveler's favorite kind of insurance. They are part faith, part fashion, and entirely portable. Pilgrims swear by them, merchants display them, nobles hoard them like souvenirs. Historians still argue whether people truly believed every scrap of bone was divine or simply enjoyed the comfort of carrying something wholly adjacent. You're not sure which camp you fall into, but you do know this: the world feels a little less cruel with a saint tucked in your pocket. As you walk, you finger the relic's small wax seal, tracing the tiny cross pressed into it. The road stretches ahead, empty but alive with whispers, trees sighing, crows calling, the wind muttering half words you pretend not to understand. The relic feels warm against your chest, as if absorbing your nervous energy and humming back reassurance. Or maybe that's just your imagination. By midday, you reach a crossroads marked by a weathered stone cross. Travelers have left offerings there: coins, shells, a single wilted flower. You add your own contribution, a pebble from the last village, smooth and round. Then you kneel briefly, half prayer, half habit. "Saint Giles," you whisper, "keep my boots from falling apart and my stomach from rebellion." It's not in any official liturgy, but you suspect he understands. You've seen all kinds of charms on the road. A pilgrim once showed you a vial of sand from the Holy Land, claiming it changed color when danger approached. It didn't. A merchant swore by a silver ring inscribed with a Latin phrase that, when translated, read simply, "Please no robbers." You've even met a nun carrying a feather said to be from the Archangel Michael himself, though she admitted it looked suspiciously like goose. Still, relics and charms aren't just superstition, they're currency. When words fail and money runs thin, faith objects become trade goods. A humble bone shard can earn you a night's shelter in a monastery or a free meal from a pious innkeeper. You once heard of a traveler who carried a vial of holy tears that turned out to be salted water. He still managed to get 2 loaves of bread and a bed out of it. Moral: sincerity sells. That night, you share a fire with a merchant who travels with his own relic, a scrap of cloth from St. Bernard's robe, he claims, though you're fairly sure Bernard was a man, not a dog. He talks about how the cloth once healed his mule's limp. You nod politely, resisting the urge to ask if the mule was just tired. The man presses on, recounting every miracle the scrap has ever performed, until you almost believe him. It's strange how faith works better in the dark, when there's nothing else to see. After he falls asleep, you turn the bone shard in your hands and study it by firelight. It's yellowed, fragile, and, if you're honest, probably from a chicken. But as you hold it, you remember your grandmother's voice, saying faith doesn't need proof, just persistence. You tuck it back into your pouch, comforted by the absurdity of it all. In the distance, a bell tolls from a hilltop monastery, low and rhythmic. You imagine the monks there praying for travelers like you, nameless figures in the night. Perhaps they really do, or perhaps that's another story people tell to feel less alone. Historians still argue whether those bells were meant to mark time or ward off spirits. You decide to believe both. The next morning, you meet a young shepherd leading his flock across the road. Around his neck hangs a small bag filled with what looks like dirt. He tells you it's blessed soil from his village chapel, protection against wolves and wows. You tell him about your relic. He looks impressed, or maybe just polite, and wishes you safe travels. The road feels lighter after that exchange, as if faith, when shared, divides its weight evenly. By noon, rain begins to fall again, soft and persistent. You tuck your relic deeper into your tunic, hoping it doesn't mind getting wet. You can almost hear your grandmother's voice again. Faith isn't meant to stay clean. You grin at the thought, because she probably never had to walk 20 miles in mud while praying her saint didn't melt. That night, you find shelter in a barn. The air smells of hay and horses, but it's dry, and that's good enough. You hang your cloak to dry and place your relic on your pack, the tiny bone gleaming faintly in the candlelight. For a moment, the absurdity of it hits you. A weary traveler, a fake saint's finger, and the hope that both will last another day. But absurd or not, it feels right. You drift off to sleep listening to the rain on the roof, the relic safe and silent beside you. Somewhere in your dreams, you imagine a saint, real or otherwise, smiling indulgently and shaking his head at your stubbornness. Maybe miracles don't come from relics at all. Maybe they come from people foolish enough to keep believing in them anyway. The clink of coins is both comforting and terrifying. You pat the leather pouch at your belt every few minutes like a nervous tick, just to make sure it's still there. In the Middle Ages, money is your most fragile lifeline. too little, and you starve. Too much, and someone notices. You walk with the rhythm of paranoia. The silver pennies you carry are smooth-edged and heavy, worn thin by countless hands before yours. Each one bears the face of a monarch who's probably long dead. Still, they'll buy a bed, a bowl of stew, or a moment of safety at an inn. You've also tucked away some copper coins for smaller trades, and one gold piece you pretend not to have. It's hidden deep in your shoe, wrapped in a scrap of wool. You hope it doesn't jingle when you walk. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers were more likely to be robbed on the open road or cheated at taverns. Honestly, you're not sure which feels worse, the quick theft of your purse or the slow insult of an overpriced bowl of gruel. Either way, you've learned to keep your wealth in layers, some visible, some buried, and some outright decoys. You even carry a small sacrifice pouch with a few low-value coins in case a bandit gets lucky. It's a medieval wallet hack. The roads hum with stories of bandits, and every traveler swears they've seen something. A man at the last inn told you about a gang that ties ropes across the road at night to snare riders. Another claimed thieves now disguise themselves as monks, though given the state of real monks, that's not a hard disguise to pull off. You've taken to sleeping with your satchel as a pillow. It's not comfortable, but neither is bankruptcy. Still, you can't travel without risk, or without money. And money itself is an odd, heavy thing to manage. A noble might send a letter of credit ahead to a monastery, where the abbot would hold his funds in trust. You, unfortunately, have no such luxury. Your bank is your boot and your nerves. One evening, you share a table at a roadside tavern with two merchants debating the safest ways to carry wealth. One swears by sewing silver coins into his cloak hem, the other hides them in hollowed-out walking sticks. You nod sagely, all the while trying not to reveal that your best hiding spot is inside a small pouch tied under your armpit. It's uncomfortable, but effective. No thief wants to reach there. The tavern itself smells of roasted meat and spilled ale. Laughter spills from a corner where someone's playing a lute badly. You pay for your stew with a single silver penny, watching the innkeeper's eyes track every motion of your purse. You notice his son sweeping the floor nearby, moving closer than necessary. Just as you finish your meal, the boy accidentally bumps your chair. You smile, slide your hand to your belt, and grip your purse before it vanishes. The boy freezes, caught. You sigh and drop a half-penny into his hand anyway. For effort, you murmur. Outside, under the moonlight, you ready your belt. You've heard of travelers hiding coins in food, baked into loaves of bread, or even stitched into cheese rinds. One tale tells of a pilgrim who swallowed his coins before crossing dangerous territory, then waited patiently to recover them later. You decide that's one life hack you'll skip. Coins aren't the only currency, of course. Tokens, relic fragments, even bits of colored glass can serve as barter if you find the right audience. A dried orange peel from the Levant once earned you a night's lodging, an old prayer bead got you breakfast. The medieval economy runs partly on faith and partly on desperation. You reach a small walled town near dusk. The gatekeeper asks for an entry toll, 2 pennies. You pay, though you suspect the fee was invented 5 minutes ago. Inside, you find the market square alive with noise. Traders shouting, pigs squealing, someone arguing over the price of onions. You stop by a money changer's booth, where a man with gold teeth counts coins faster than you can blink. His scales gleam in the fading light, perfectly balanced. Probably. You trade 2 of your silver pennies for smaller change, hoping he's not cheating you with lightweight coins. He probably is. As night falls, you retreat to a cheap inn, where you wedge a stool under the door handle and hide your purse beneath your tunic. You've heard horror stories of thieves slipping coins out of bags while their owners sleep, cutting tiny slits in leather, quiet as cats. One traveler even swore a rat trained by thieves once carried coins through floorboards. You'd laugh, but it feels too plausible. Sometime past midnight, a distant clatter jolts you awake. You hold your breath, listening. Just the wind? A drunken guest? Or something else? You grip the dagger by your side, your other kind of currency, and wait. Nothing happens. After a while, you chuckle softly to yourself. You've grown so attached to those coins that they feel almost alive, whispering to you in your sleep. By morning, the fear fades. You buy a heel of bread and a slice of salted pork from the innkeeper and head back to the road. Your purse feels a little lighter, but so does your heart. Maybe that's the trade every traveler makes: safety for motion, gold for experience, comfort for story. At the next bridge, you toss a single copper penny into the river, as is custom, for luck. You watch it vanish beneath the ripples and wonder how many others lie buried there, offerings to whoever guards travelers from both thieves and themselves. The wind picks up, and you pull your cloak tighter. The road is calling again, and your purse, miraculously, still jingles. You've walked so long now that you trust the shape of the road more than your own memory. It winds through villages, forests, and the occasional field of judgmental sheep. The air smells of dew and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance a bell tolls, probably the wrong hour. You pause, squint at the sky, and try to decide if you're still heading east. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully. Maps, of course, would help, if they weren't mostly works of fiction. You unfold the one you bought in a market 3 towns back, and it greets you with a cheerful collection of blobs and squiggles labeled "Here be forest and river," sometimes. The road you're on appears as a faint, crooked line that vanishes halfway across the page, replaced by a doodle of a fish. You sigh. Historians still argue whether medieval maps were meant for travel or for divine contemplation. Personally, you think they were meant for comedy. In fairness, true maps do exist, just not for people like you. Monks in scriptoria sometimes copied detailed pilgrim routes or trade paths, but those parchments rarely left their shelves. For most travelers, direction came from stories. Follow the river until it smells of salt, someone might say, or walk toward the sun until you reach the town where bread costs too much. Vague? Absolutely. But you've learned to trust rumor as much as geography. You stop at a crossroads where a weathered post lists destinations: Rouen, that way, and Paris, maybe that way. The lettering looks like it was carved by someone guessing. Still, you choose the path that feels right. It's always about feeling, isn't it? Medieval navigation is an act of faith disguised as walking. A merchant catches up to you, his pack clinking with glass bottles. He asks if you know the way to Chartres. You tell him confidently, yes, though you absolutely don't. Together, you trudge along, trading half-remembered advice. Turn left after the ruined mill. Keep right when the crows grow louder. Navigation by vibes, you might call it. At midday, you both stop by a wayside shrine, a stone alcove filled with candles and dusty offerings. Travelers often leave small marks there, initials carved into the wall, pebbles arranged like arrows. One scratched message reads, "Water ahead, 3 days." You hope whoever left it wasn't exaggerating. You also notice a faint carving of a fish pointing the opposite direction of your map's fish. So much for consistency. When you walk again, you start using the sun as your compass. East in the morning, west in the evening. Simple enough, until the sky clouds over and the world becomes one big gray blur. You consider following the merchant's mule instead. Animals, after all, seem to have better instincts. But then you remember the story of the pilgrim who followed a donkey for 2 days only to end up back at his starting inn. You decide to take your chances with the clouds. As the hours pass, the path splits and merges again, narrowing into forest shade. The trees crowd close, and you start to hear every rustle like a question. You remember something an old friar once said: "All roads lead to Rome, but not all woods let you out again." Encouraging, man. You press on anyway. When you finally emerge into open fields, you spot a small hut where an old woman sells maps. You approach eagerly, hoping for clarity. She spreads out a parchment painted with bright colors, rivers like ribbons, towns like tiny castles. It's beautiful, useless art. Still, you buy it. She throws in a compass made of polished bone for good measure, claiming it always points towards safety. You test it. The needle wobbles uncertainly, then points toward her hut. Suspicious. That night, you share a campfire with a group of pilgrims heading the same general direction. One of them, a friar with a round face, unrolls his own map, less of a chart, more of a spiritual diagram. It shows Jerusalem at the center, surrounded by rings of seas, beasts, and biblical events. "This," he says proudly, "is how the world truly looks." You nod, though it resembles more of a medieval pizza than a planet. Historians still argue whether maps like his were practical or devotional. You suspect they were both, depending on how lost the monk felt. As the fire crackles, the friar teaches you a simple trick: find north by watching which side of a church tower grows moss. You thank him, though you also notice that moss seems to grow wherever it pleases. Still, the lesson sticks. Travel long enough, and you start to build your own mental map, one that includes not just towns and rivers, but smells, sounds, even the personalities of roads. By dawn, the pilgrims are gone, their footprints vanishing into mist. You set off again, guided more by instinct than direction. Every milestone feels like a victory. You find a milestone stone half buried in mud, its numbers long eroded. You pat it anyway, a kind of traveler's high five. Later that afternoon, a sudden downpour washes away your sense of orientation completely. You huddle under your cloak and try to remember the last landmark you recognized. Was it the leaning oak? Or the field that looked suspiciously like every other field? You laugh out loud, because at this point, you could be walking in circles and never know it. Still, there's a strange peace in the not knowing. Every bend in the road is an invitation to discovery, or disaster. Maybe both. You realize that the medieval traveler's greatest tool isn't a map or compass at all, but patience. The world is larger than your understanding and smaller than your imagination, and somewhere between those truths lies your next inn. By nightfall, you see the distant glow of torches, a settlement. The sign outside the gate reads, "Welcome, stranger." You grin. At least you've arrived somewhere. You fold your useless maps, tuck them into your pack, and mutter to yourself, "Here be adventure." The next morning brings not just sore feet, but bureaucracy. You've made it to a border town, a cluster of timber houses straddling a shallow river, with a guard post that looks far too pleased with itself. The men stationed there wear mismatched armor and expressions of deep suspicion, the kind only achieved by people paid to frown professionally. One steps forward, holding out a gloved hand. "Papers," he says. "Ah yes. Papers." You dig through your satchel with the same confidence as a magician bluffing a trick, eventually producing a folded parchment that you bought 2 towns back. It's a letter of passage, allegedly signed by a bishop whose handwriting looks suspiciously like your own. You offer it with a nervous smile. The guard squints, sniffs, and frowns deeper. He calls over another guard, who squints harder. You brace yourself for trouble, but then the first guard shrugs. "Close enough," he mutters, stamping the parchment with something that looks like a chicken's footprint. And just like that, you're through. Traveling in medieval Europe means collecting documents like a nervous pigeon gathers twigs, writs of safe conduct, guild letters, pilgrimage passes, even forged seals if you can afford them. Historians still argue whether these documents genuinely protected travelers or simply gave guards something new to confiscate. You suspect the latter. For long-distance journeys, letters of passage were essential, especially for merchants or pilgrims. These documents declared your purpose, to visit the shrine of Saint whatever, and sometimes promised protection from local lords. In theory, no one could harm a traveler under holy business. In practice, plenty tried. You clutch your bishop's letter with the reverence of someone who knows it's both a blessing and a joke. A little further along the road, you encounter a group of pilgrims waving a banner stitched with the Virgin Mary's image. They carry official-looking scrolls sealed in red wax. One of them, an elderly man with a smile too bright for this century, asks if you're bound for the same shrine. You nod vaguely. He beams, showing a single golden tooth, and insists you join them. Traveling in a group means safety. It also means bureaucracy times 10. At the next checkpoint, the pilgrims proudly display their documents. You try to blend in, standing at the back. The guard inspects the banner, then the scrolls, then, of course, your letter. He frowns at the signature, frowns at you, and finally waves you on with a mutter about too many saints, not enough ink. You exhale slowly. That night, the group camps beside a mill pond. The air smells of damp grain and candle wax. Over dinner, the pilgrims trade stories of documents gone wrong. One woman recalls her cousin's letter, which melted in the rain, rendering the ink into an abstract prayer. Another man swears he met a traveler carrying a forged royal decree that accidentally granted him ownership of a cow and half a bridge. You try to imagine the paperwork that followed. When your companions fall asleep, you unroll your parchment again, eyeing the wobbly bishop's seal you drew yourself. It's not a terrible forgery, if one squints and assumes the bishop had the handwriting of a distracted goat. You add a few decorative flourishes for good measure, mostly to amuse yourself. If questioned again, you can always insist the bishop was inspired. The next morning, you stop at a small priory to refill your water flask. The prior, a mild man with ink-stained fingers, notices the parchment peeking from your satchel. Traveling under church sanction? He asks, curious. You hesitate, then nod. He smiles knowingly. Good. The road's kinder to those under heaven's ink. He offers you bread and blessings, both of which you gratefully accept. For once, paperwork has paid off. Later, you pass a band of traders hauling carts of wool. Their leader proudly displays a wooden token carved with his guild's crest, a sheep's head surrounded by leaves. Better than any letter, he says, tapping it. A guard might doubt parchment, but no one doubts a brand. He's right. Physical symbols carry power in this world. Wax melts, ink fades, but a carved emblem endures. Of course, not all documentation is honest. You once heard of a monk who made his fortune selling papal indulgence passports, essentially permission slips from heaven, redeemable at your nearest afterlife. Another rumor tells of travelers who bribed guards with blank parchments, promising to fill them out later. Bureaucracy, it seems, is timeless. As the day wears on, you tuck your forged letter deep into your pack, alongside the relic in your dwindling stash of coins. You can't help but admire how these fragile scraps, paper, wax, symbols, hold the power to open or close worlds. One misplaced flourish, and you're a criminal. One perfect signature, and you're a pilgrim under divine protection. When you stop for the night, a light rain falls, spattering your parchment pouch. You panic briefly, shielding it under your cloak. The ink bleeds a little at the edges, curling into graceful smudges. It almost looks intentional now, like the bishop wept on it himself. You laugh quietly in the dark. Sometimes luck and forgery share the same handwriting. Before sleep claims you, you stare into the fire and think about all the travelers before you. Merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, each clutching their own fragile proofs of belonging. Maybe the world hasn't changed that much. Even now, centuries later, people still carry papers to prove they exist, belong, or mean no harm. And just like you, they probably hope no one looks too closely at the seal. You roll the parchment tight again, secure it with a bit of twine, and whisper, "Do your job, old friend." The rain softens, the fire fades, and you drift to sleep knowing that sometimes survival isn't about courage or strength, it's about good stationery. You've walked so long now that you trust the shape of the road more than your own memory. It winds through villages, forests, and the occasional field of judgmental sheep. The air smells of dew and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance a bell tolls, probably the wrong hour. You pause, squint at the sky, and try to decide if you're still heading east. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully. Maps, of course, would help, if they weren't mostly works of fiction. You unfold the one you bought in a market 3 towns back, and it greets you with a cheerful collection of blobs and squiggles labeled "Here be forest and river," sometimes. The road you're on appears as a faint, crooked line that vanishes halfway across the page, replaced by a doodle of a fish. You sigh. Historians still argue whether medieval maps were meant for travel or for divine contemplation. Personally, you think they were meant for comedy. In fairness, true maps do exist, just not for people like you. Monks in scriptoria sometimes copied detailed pilgrim routes or trade paths, but those parchments rarely left their shelves. For most travelers, direction came from stories. Follow the river until it smells of salt, someone might say, or walk toward the sun until you reach the town where bread costs too much. Vague? Absolutely. But you've learned to trust rumor as much as geography. You stop at a crossroads where a weathered post lists destinations: Rouen, that way, and Paris, maybe that way. The lettering looks like it was carved by someone guessing. Still, you choose the path that feels right. It's always about feeling, isn't it? Medieval navigation is an act of faith disguised as walking. A merchant catches up to you, his pack clinking with glass bottles. He asks if you know the way to Chartres. You tell him confidently, yes, though you absolutely don't. Together, you trudge along, trading half-remembered advice. Turn left after the ruined mill. Keep right when the crows grow louder. Navigation by vibes, you might call it. At midday, you both stop by a wayside shrine, a stone alcove filled with candles and dusty offerings. Travelers often leave small marks there, initials carved into the wall, pebbles arranged like arrows. One scratched message reads, "Water ahead, 3 days." You hope whoever left it wasn't exaggerating. You also notice a faint carving of a fish pointing the opposite direction of your map's fish. So much for consistency. When you walk again, you start using the sun as your compass. East in the morning, west in the evening. Simple enough, until the sky clouds over and the world becomes one big gray blur. You consider following the merchant's mule instead. Animals, after all, seem to have better instincts. But then you remember the story of the pilgrim who followed a donkey for 2 days only to end up back at his starting inn. You decide to take your chances with the clouds. As the hours pass, the path splits and merges again, narrowing into forest shade. The trees crowd close, and you start to hear every rustle like a question. You remember something an old friar once said: "All roads lead to Rome, but not all woods let you out again." Encouraging, man. You press on anyway. When you finally emerge into open fields, you spot a small hut where an old woman sells maps. You approach eagerly, hoping for clarity. She spreads out a parchment painted with bright colors, rivers like ribbons, towns like tiny castles. It's beautiful, useless art. Still, you buy it. She throws in a compass made of polished bone for good measure, claiming it always points towards safety. You test it. The needle wobbles uncertainly, then points toward her hut. Suspicious. That night, you shower campfire with a group of pilgrims heading the same general direction. One of them, a friar with a round face, unrolls his own map, less of a chart, more of a spiritual diagram. It shows Jerusalem at the center, surrounded by rings of seas, beasts, and biblical events. This, he says proudly, is how the world truly looks. You nod, though it resembles more of a medieval pizza than a planet. Historians still argue whether maps like his were practical or devotional. You suspect they were both, depending on how lost the monk felt. As the fire crackles, the friar teaches you a simple trick: find north by watching which side of a church tower grows moss. You thank him, though you also notice that moss seems to grow wherever it pleases. Still, the lesson sticks. Travel long enough, and you start to build your own mental map, one that includes not just towns and rivers, but smells, sounds, even the personalities of roads. By dawn, the pilgrims are gone, their footprints vanishing into mist. You set off again, guided more by instinct than direction. Every milestone feels like a victory. You find a milestone stone half buried in mud, its numbers long eroded. You pat it anyway, a kind of traveler's high five. Later that afternoon, a sudden downpour washes away your sense of orientation completely. You huddle under your cloak and try to remember the last landmark you recognized. Was it the leaning oak? Or the field that looked suspiciously like every other field? You laugh out loud, because at this point, you could be walking in circles and never know it. Still, there's a strange peace in the not knowing. Every bend in the road is an invitation to discovery, or disaster. Maybe both. You realize that the medieval traveler's greatest tool isn't a map or compass at all, but patience. The world is larger than your understanding and smaller than your imagination, and somewhere between those truths lies your next inn. By nightfall, you see the distant glow of torches, a settlement. The sign outside the gate reads, "Welcome, stranger." You grin. At least you've arrived somewhere. You fold your useless maps, tuck them into your pack, and mutter to yourself, "Here be adventure." Morning arrives with a grey, half-hearted light, and you pull on yesterday's damp cloak with the resigned grace of someone who's forgotten what dry feels like. As you shoulder your satchel, you notice something curious, a change of clothes, or rather, the lack of one. Every traveler you've met wears the same outfit day after day, each layer gradually merging with the next until cloth and skin are nearly indistinguishable. And yet, how you dress along the road can mean everything. In the medieval world, clothing isn't just fabric, it's identity. It speaks louder than your accent, louder than your words, and sometimes even louder than your coin purse. So you've learned to be adaptable, to become a sort of traveling actor with a wardrobe made of wool, linen, and nerve. Your main garment, of course, is your tunic. Once brown, now road-colored, it has been mended so many times it could qualify as its own tapestry. When you started this journey, you thought you'd wear it proudly, the mark of a humble pilgrim or practical wanderer. But as you entered towns and manors, you noticed how others looked at you. Too plain, and people assume you're a beggar. Too fine, and they assume you're a thief. So now, you adjust accordingly. 4 days spent walking through forest paths and nameless hamlets, you wear your coarsest tunic and sturdy boots. The boots are cracked at the seams, lined with wool, and soaked through more often than not, but they are loyal companions. When you approach a larger town or a monastery, you brush off the worst of the dust and pull from your bag a thin cloak dyed a faded red. It's your respectable garment, worn to impress gatekeepers and innkeepers alike. Once, when you joined a small merchant caravan, You borrowed a spare cap and belt from a spice trader named Alon. "Look the part," he advised, grinning as he adjusted your borrowed cap. "If you look like you're worth robbing, people assume you're not foolish enough to travel alone." You're still not sure whether that was wisdom or madness, but it worked. And then there's the strange art of dressing up or down depending on company. Traveling priests can be suspicious of anyone too worldly looking. Nobles sneer at threadbare travelers unless they appear to be on holy business. Once, to avoid paying a toll, you even tried passing yourself off as a lay brother. You adjusted your cloak, adopted a pious slouch, and quoted a psalm you half remembered from childhood. Miraculously, it worked, until one of the guards asked which monastery you hailed from. You mumbled "the one with the bell tower," crossed yourself, and walked faster. Each garment in your pack serves a purpose. The thin linen shirt for summer heat. The heavy wool tunic for nights by the fire. A small coif, head covering, to shield from wind and lice. A pair of gloves with more holes than leather. And tucked away in the bottom of your satchel, your prized possession, a clean chemise, soft and white. You rarely wear it, saving it for those rare moments when you can bathe and feel human again. Clean clothes, in this world, are more luxury than silk. You've noticed how your clothes change how people treat you. Dressed like a pilgrim, you're greeted with sympathy and a bowl of stew. Dressed like a peddler, you offered trade but no trust. Dressed like a minor noble, once, thanks to a borrowed cloak, you were nearly charged for traveling above your station. There's danger in fabric. At night, when you sit by the fire, you sometimes watch others in your traveling group shed their disguises. The merchant unties his embroidered sleeves. The pious woman removes her veil to reveal a scarred, sunburned face. The former soldier lays aside his worn surcoat, revealing a shirt patched with mismatched cloth. Everyone on the road is someone else, it seems. You realize that travel doesn't just take you places, it lets you escape the places you came from. In a wayside tavern, you meet a tailor from Rouen who boasts that he can tell a man's entire story from the way his hem hangs. "See a frayed edge," he says, "and you see hardship. A clean seam? Vanity. But a patch carefully sewn? That's hope." You look down at your own sleeve, which has been mended more times than you can count, and you smile. Hope, it seems, wears well. When the rain starts again, as it always does, you pull your cloak tight and watch the dye bleed faintly down the fabric. You think of the colors people wear: green for youth, blue for devotion, red for courage or sin, depending on the preacher. Your clothes are all the wrong colors, and yet perfectly right for who you've become, someone both everywhere and nowhere. Later that night, you wash your shirt in a stream, ignoring how cold the water is. You wring it out, hang it near the fire, and sit close to the smoke. The smell of wet wool and ash fills your nose, oddly comforting. Tomorrow, when you set out again, your clothes will still be damp, your boots will still pinch, and you'll still look halfway between respectable and desperate. But you'll walk with the quiet confidence of someone who's learned that on the road, costume is character. As you drift toward sleep, you think of home, the neatly folded garments waiting in a chest, untouched for months. Here, on the road, you've become a patchwork creature, stitched from experience, stitched from miles. And though your clothes may fray, you realize something important. It's not just what you wear that changes who you are, it's how the journey wears you. You wake to the sound of your stomach staging a protest. Travel, for all its romance and scenic misery, comes down to one thing: food. Or more precisely, the eternal question of whether you'll have any. Your rations are humble but predictable: a crust of bread hard enough to qualify as weaponry, a slice of cheese that's developing its own opinions about existence, and a leathery strip of dried meat you keep telling yourself tastes smoky rather than old. You chew slowly, pretending it's breakfast at an inn with pewter dishes and warm honeyed porridge. It isn't, but imagination's cheaper than actual food. Medieval travelers are equal parts forager, scavenger, and negotiator. You've learned to recognize edible weeds along the roadside: nettles, sorrel, dandelion greens. The first time you picked them, you were proud of your self-sufficiency. The second time, you realize they taste like the disappointment of unpaid rent. Still, boiled with a pinch of salt and a scrap of fat, they'll keep you alive. Today you're lucky enough to be near farmland. The smell of baking bread drifts from a distant cottage, and you follow it like a hopeful hound. The woman inside eyes you warily but softens when you greet her with a respectful bow and mention you're traveling to pray at a shrine. Pilgrims, even hungry ones, are hard to refuse. She gives you a small loaf, dense, dark, flecked with rye husks. You thank her and, in return, repair her gate hinge with a bit of cord from your pack. Trade isn't always coin, sometimes it's kindness disguised as usefulness. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers were usually fed by hospitality or by cunning. You've experienced both. Some days you're welcomed at a monastery table, the brothers serving lentil stew while discussing salvation between spoonfuls. Other times, you're chased off with shouts and dogs, clutching half a turnip and your dignity. Salt, you've learned, is a traveler's gold. You carry a small pouch of it wrapped in linen, careful not to spill a grain. Sprinkle a little on anything and it feels like a feast. Once, you traded a handful of salt for a warm bowl of pottage thick with barley. Another time, you used it to preserve leftover meat, a generous term for what was, admittedly, mostly bone. Without salt, every meal spoils. With it, even roadkill tastes like survival. Your cooking gear is minimal: a small iron pot, blackened from 100 fires, and a spoon carved from birch. You boil everything in the same pot: stew, tea, occasionally socks. You pretend the lingering flavors add character. When food runs short, you stretch it with crumbs, herbs, or imagination. One evening, while camped near a crossroads, you share a meal with a band of minstrels. They travel light but eat well, relying on charm and song to fill their bowls. Their cook, a wiry woman with a scar and a wicked grin, shows you how to make traveler's pudding. It involves stale bread, a splash of ale, and anything sweet enough to disguise the mold. You laugh, you eat, and you agree it's the best thing you've had in weeks. The next morning, one of the minstrels gifts you a small tin cup, dented but serviceable. To drink from when you can afford wine, he says. You use it mostly for water, sometimes for broth, and once, disastrously, for a sip of homemade vinegar you mistook for cider. Lesson learned. As the days pass, you realize food is less about flavor and more about rhythm. Meals become a ritual that divides the endless walking into digestible pieces. You look forward to that moment each evening when you sit, light a fire, and pretend the world is briefly under control. You recall hearing that nobles travel with entire kitchens in tow, wagons full of cooks, pots, spices, even live chickens. You imagine the chaos of it: cooks shouting, fires sputtering, roasted pheasants turning on spits. Meanwhile, you stir your lentils with a stick and mutter, "Must be nice." Then there's the water problem. Rivers look clean until you drink from one and spend the next 2 days reconsidering your life choices. So you've learned to boil your water, at least when you have the patience. When you don't, you mutter a prayer and hope your stomach's braver than your faith. One evening, after walking too far without finding a village, you catch a rabbit with a loop of twine and more luck than skill. You roast it over your small fire, the smell making your mouth water. You can almost hear the ghost of some medieval dietitian approving, "Protein, at last." You save the bones to boil for soup the next night. Waste nothing. Eat everything. Survive. Still, you can't help but miss the comforts of home. The smell of fresh bread, the laughter around a shared table, the certainty that you'd eat again tomorrow. Out here, every bite feels like both a victory and a gamble. As the fire dies, you scrape your pot clean and set it upside down to dry. You think of all the travelers across the centuries, each of them crouched by some lonely road, stirring a pot and dreaming of something tastier. Food may change, ingredients may shift, but the hunger is the same. The hunger not just for nourishment, but for comfort, for something known amid the wilderness. You lie back, your stomach pleasantly full for once, and smile at the stars. The road may take your strength, your sleep, and your dignity, but as long as you have bread and salt, and maybe a joke to go with them, you'll make it to the next dawn. The next stretch of your journey tests more than your feet, it tests your patience. You've been following a road that seems allergic to straight lines, winding through forests, across streams, and up hills that feel personally offended by your existence. Your cloak catches every bramble. Your boots, already half dead, begin their final act of defiance by sprouting holes the size of regrets. Still, travel is less about comfort and more about endurance. And the greatest lesson of endurance? Carrying what you need, not what you want. Your pack, though light by most standards, has become both your closest friend and worst enemy. Every item has earned its place, by utility, by desperation, or by the simple fact that throwing it away felt like admitting defeat. At the top, you keep the essentials, flint and steel wrapped in cloth to keep them dry, a bit of tinder, a knife, a length of rope, and a small waxed pouch holding a sewing needle and thread. You've mended everything from cloaks to wounds with that needle, and though you're no surgeon, your stitches hold, mostly. Deeper in the pack is your sleeping gear, a woolen blanket, heavy and faintly damp no matter the weather. You roll it each morning with the precision of a monk folding parchment, then spend the day adjusting it on your back as it tries to escape like an uncooperative cat. Some travelers carry feather bedding, but you've learned to appreciate simplicity. When you're this tired, even a patch of grass feels like velvet. You also carry a small strip of parchment with prayers written on it, given by a monk early in your travels. It's not that you're overly pious, but it feels comforting to have something holy tucked between the crumbs and coins. You sometimes take it out at dusk, not to read, but to remind yourself that even the road has its blessings. Travelers pack strange things, though. You once met a merchant who carried a jar of goose fat. He swore it cured blisters, polished boots, and kept away evil spirits. Another swore by carrying a small wooden spoon carved by his mother. For luck, he said, before using it to fish an unfortunate beetle out of his soup. Historians still argue whether travelers truly relied on superstition or simply enjoyed collecting excuses for their suffering. You, too, have your token, a smooth stone you picked up near your village at the start of the journey. It's nothing special, gray, rounded, but it fits perfectly in your palm, and somehow, holding it steadies you. When the wind howls through the trees or thunder rumbles too close, you grip it tightly and remember where you began. Of course, packing isn't just about sentiment, it's strategy. You've learned the art of rearranging your satchel depending on the road ahead. Climbing hills? Keep water near the top. Expecting rain? Wrap everything in oilcloth. Passing through bandit country? Hide valuables where no thief wants to look, beneath your spare socks. No one, not even the most desperate outlaw, will rummage there twice. You occasionally envy the professional pilgrims and traders who travel with carts or pack animals. Mules can carry barrels of wine and bolts of cloth. You, meanwhile, carry a half-empty pot and a rock with emotional significance. But there's freedom in it. You move faster, quieter, lighter, well, lighter in spirit, if not in smell. Tonight, you camp beneath a ruined watchtower, its stones slick with moss. As you unpack, You marvel at how quickly routine becomes ritual. Flint in your left hand, steel in your right, a few practice strikes, and there's fire. You set your pot over it, toss in a handful of oats, and watch the water simmer. The rhythm of it all feels almost sacred. You find yourself wondering what future travelers will carry. Tiny metal cups? Bottles that glow? Some kind of invisible parchment that tells them where to go? Then you laugh softly, shaking your head. Every age believes its burdens are unique, but really, it's all the same. Something to eat, something to wear, something to believe in. When you stretch out on your blanket, your pack serves as your pillow. It's uncomfortable, but that's part of the charm. Hard edges remind you what's still yours. You think of the time you nearly lost it crossing a flooded bridge, and the sheer panic you felt watching it bob away downstream. You dove in after it without thinking, came out soaked, triumphant, and shivering. A monk on the far side had watched the whole scene and simply said, "You love your burden too much." You'd replied, "It's the only one that listens." Now, with the fire fading, you reach out and touch the pack beside you. The leather is cracked, the straps frayed, but it's survived the same storms you have. In a world that demands constant letting go, of comfort, of home, of certainty, this small bundle of worn possessions is your anchor. As you close your eyes, you imagine centuries of travelers before you, each with their own burdens strapped to their backs. Some heavy, some light, all meaningful. You realize the truth of the road. It doesn't matter what you carry, only that you carry on. By now, the rhythm of the road has become second nature. The crunch of boots on gravel, the tug of the pack strap against your shoulder, the small, defiant joy of surviving another sunrise. Yet as the miles stretch behind you, you begin to crave something more than food or rest. You crave stories. Every traveler does. Stories are the currency of the road, traded more eagerly than coins and far more valuable. They pass from campfire to campfire, polished by retelling, warped by memory, and stitched with exaggeration until no one knows where truth ends and invention begins. You've gathered quite a collection. Tonight, you walk beside a slow-moving wagon carrying 3 merchants and a dozen barrels of ale. They invite you to join them for supper, and you accept without hesitation. No one refuses an invitation that begins with ale. As the fire crackles, one of them, a broad man with a missing tooth and too much confidence, leans in. Ever hear the tale of the ghostly pilgrim of Vézelay? You shake your head. He grins, lowering his voice. They say he walks the roads at night, carrying a lantern made from a skull. If you meet him and don't offer a prayer, you vanish by dawn. You smirk. Maybe he just wants company. The merchant laughs, but his companions cross themselves. You notice how even in jest, superstition lingers like smoke. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers truly believed such tales, but belief isn't the point. On lonely roads, fear fills the silence, and a good ghost story is cheaper than courage. When it's your turn, you tell them about the old hermit who once shared your fire, a man who claimed to have spoken with angels in the mountains. He'd offered you dried figs and whispered that each star was a soul on its way home. The merchants listen, half skeptical, half enchanted. When you finish, the man with the missing tooth chuckles. "Angels or ale fumes," he says. "Either way, good story." You sleep that night full of warmth and noise, your dreams crowded with pilgrims and phantoms. In the morning, the merchants are gone, leaving only wheel ruts in the mud and the faint smell of spilled beer. You shoulder your pack and smile. That's how most stories end, with nothing tangible left behind but the urge to keep moving. A few days later, you reach a small roadside inn, the kind where the floorboards creak in protest and the fire never quite catches. You pay for a corner of the common room, set down your pack, and listen. Travelers fill the air with talk, a soldier bragging about battles you suspect never happened, a peddler describing a miracle spring that cures baldness, a monk recounting visions of the Virgin in a barley field. You soak it all in, savoring the way stories knit strangers together like invisible thread. Sometimes, when conversation dies, you tell tales of your own making. The secret to a good traveler's story, you've learned, is simple. Begin with truth and end with audacity. You might describe a real village, then add a dragon in the well. You might recall a storm, then claim it spoke your name. You laugh as you say it, but the best part? No one can prove you wrong. You recall a strange tidbit from a wandering scholar. In medieval law, lying for entertainment was not a sin, provided you admitted it. Thus, the scholar had said with a wink, one may tell falsehoods honestly. You've lived by that rule ever since. Of course, not every tale is harmless. Some carry warnings, the kind you ignore at your peril. There's the story of the cursed bridge near Chartres, where travelers who cross without tossing a coin for the drowned are doomed to lose their way. You scoffed when you heard it, yet when you finally crossed a bridge that looked suspiciously familiar, you found yourself flicking a coin into the water, just in case. You've also heard darker things, of cut-passers who pose as monks, of innkeepers who drug wine, of travelers who vanish after following will-o'-the-wisps into the marsh. You dismiss them all if not for the little shiver that crawls down your spine when you walk alone at dusk. Sometimes, superstition is simply a way to keep your instincts sharp. Still, not all stories warn. Some comfort. Around fires, people speak of saints who appear to guide lost travelers, of stars that lead to safety, of unseen hands that steady a faltering step. You cling to those tales when the night grows too vast. As you walk through a valley one evening, a shepherd calls out to you, offering a bit of cheese in exchange for a story. You tell him one about a goose that outwitted a band of thieves, mostly true, except for the part where the goose talks. He laughs so hard he nearly drops his staff. You should be a bard, he says. You bow dramatically. Too much walking, you reply. By now, you realize something profound. Travelers carry their worlds in two bundles, the pack on their back and the stories in their head. One holds tools, the other, meaning. That night, you lie beneath a sky so clear it looks polished. The stars seem close enough to touch, and you imagine them whispering all the stories ever told, of kings and beggars, saints and fools, all walking the same endless road. You drift to sleep smiling, certain that someday, someone else will tell your story, and maybe they'll make it sound braver than it was. The road narrows as you near your final stretch, a long ribbon of mud and stone winding between hedgerows heavy with autumn berries. Your boots are worn to their soles, your cloak is more patch than fabric, and your walking stick has developed a personality somewhere between sarcastic and supportive. You are, in short, every inch a seasoned traveler. You pass through a village you don't know the name of, and perhaps it doesn't matter. Every village smells faintly of smoke, dung, and bread. Every tavern door creaks in the same tired way. The rhythm of life on the road has smoothed your edges. You no longer startle at barking dogs or suspicious glances. You nod at strangers, share fires with shepherds, and move on. Always on. By now, you've learned that the journey is less about reaching a shrine or market and more about discovering what you can live without. You've shed so many things, extra clothes, expectations, illusions of safety. Each mile strips you lighter, until you carry only what matters, salt, stories, and stubbornness. A storm rolls in one afternoon, the sky bruised and churning. You find shelter beneath a stone archway, one of those half-ruined bridges the Romans built long before your great-grandfather's time. The air tastes of iron and ozone, and rain drips in steady rhythm through the cracks. You chew the last of your bread and watch water rush below, thinking of all the travelers who must have crouched here before you. Pilgrims clutching relics, merchants guarding wares, soldiers dreaming of home. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers viewed the road as a test or a calling. You suspect it was both. Each journey remakes the traveler, whether or not the traveler notices. Somewhere between the blisters and the laughter, you've changed too. You used to think of the road as something you walked. Now you think of it as something that walks you. When the rain finally stops, you continue uphill until the air clears and the world opens wide before you. Far off, beyond a patchwork of fields, you glimpse your destination, a small monastery perched on a hill, its bell tower glinting like a beacon. You're almost there. But instead of rushing, you slow down. The end of a journey always feels too abrupt, like waking from a good dream before the best part. Along the way, you pass a group of pilgrims heading the other direction. They nod politely. One woman calls out, "How far to the river?" You tell her, 2 days, if your feet behave, and she laughs. You notice she's carrying the same sort of pack you once had, overstuffed and unwieldy. You resist the urge to warn her she won't need half of it. Everyone must learn that lesson themselves. By sunset, you reach the monastery gate. The porter, a kindly man with more wrinkles than rope, greets you with a tired smile. "Another one from the road," he says. You nod. "All of us are," you reply. Inside, the air smells of beeswax and old wood. The monks offer a bowl of soup, a loaf of bread, and a bed softer than moss. As you eat, you listen to the quiet rhythm of life here, the chant of evening prayers, the gentle scrape of spoons, the whisper of wind through stone arches. For the first time in weeks, no one's shouting, bargaining, or spitting. You almost don't know what to do with the peace. After supper, you're shown to a small room, a pallet, a candle, and a crucifix on the wall. You set down your pack, unlace your boots, and sit in silence. The stillness feels heavier than the miles. You think of everything you've carried, not just tools and rations, but moments, the baker's kindness, the minstrel's laughter, the storms survived and jokes told to keep your courage awake. You open your satchel and take out your smooth stone, turning it in your hand. The surface is warm from your body heat. You place it on the windowsill, watching moonlight brush across it. "You've done well," you whisper, and it feels like you're speaking to yourself. Later, as you lie on the cot, you listen to the bells toll in the distance. Each note sounds like a farewell, but also a promise. Tomorrow, you might move on again, or maybe not. Perhaps you'll stay, help mend walls, teach the monks a song about stubborn mules. Or perhaps you'll shoulder your pack and follow another road, just to see where it ends. Because that's the secret of traveling, isn't it? You never really arrive. The world keeps unfolding, and curiosity keeps tugging at your sleeve. And so, even now, you can almost feel the next path calling, whispering that somewhere beyond the horizon, there's another fire, another story, another night waiting just for you. The fire in your mind begins to dim, its glow fading to a quiet warmth. You imagine the road behind you, the ruts filled with rain, the hedgerows heavy with dew, the countless footsteps softening into memory. Your cloak rests folded by your side, and for the first time in a long while, your hands are empty. The journey has ended, but the world hasn't stopped turning. You can still feel it, the slow pulse of life beyond the walls, the faint hum of insects in the grass, the steady breathing of the earth. You've walked through storms and silence, through laughter and fear, and somehow, you've come out softer, not harder. It's strange, isn't it? All those miles, all those burdens, and yet, what you carry now weighs almost nothing. Just the small, steady knowledge that you've been part of something vast and unending. The simple act of moving through the world, 1 foot at a time. So, as you settle into your bed, feel the weight slip from your shoulders. Let the sounds fade, the crackle of the fire, the whisper of wind through the shutters, even your own heartbeat slowing to match the rhythm of the night. You've earned this rest. Tomorrow will come, as it always does. But for now, there's nothing left to do but breathe, and dream, and know that somewhere out there, another traveler is walking beneath the same stars, packing their hope, their hunger, and their courage, just as you once did. Sleep well, traveler. The road can wait until morning.